Hey, we're going to do a short video today. We're going to call this video Good Home Inspector and Experienced Home Inspector. Now, I'm not doing this video about me. I'm just doing a video on, there's a lot of home inspectors, and this industry has been around for decades. So a lot of home inspectors been around for decades. And so good home inspectors could be, just people that got out of college or, have taken some home inspection courses. And some of the courses are expensive, $3-4 grand, 1 or 2 weeks, and you take a test. And so I'm going to call those guys good home inspectors, and they probably are. There's a lot of ASHI, there's several other ones out there that you could join and take their classes and their continued ed, and you become a good home inspector. So this is about good home inspectors and experience. Now, experienced home inspectors are probably inspectors that have been around for 20 years, maybe have done 10,000 home inspections or 20. So, a lot of times you learn things from books and, you put that on your report. But a lot of times there's other things you want to talk about just from your experience, which is a little bit more important than just a home inspection. So let's just get right into this. Okay, and I'm going to this is just an example of an inspection and an example of a few photos from the inspection, and I'm going to show you how you put this together, how it becomes a big story. It's not their little pieces, and at the end you'll see how it all comes together, and generally an experienced home inspector will be able to figure that out. So let's go right to the first slide. So you're at the home and you see this and you're like, well, what is that? And it's on a corner of the lot, and as you're driving around the property in the neighborhood, you see more of these. So you figure, all right, maybe there's some kind of plumbing system underground because this area probably got flooded, and these are pumps and things like that. So you basically, a good home inspector is going to say, hey, that's kind of weird. Why don't you ask the homeowner what these are for? Because you want to know, what if they stink? When it rains, maybe there's a tank underneath, maybe there's an easement. So a good home inspector, even though it's on a tree lawn, they're going to say, hey, ask homeowner what's going on. So now a good home inspector is going to look at this roof and say, hey, the roof looks okay. It's kind of old. It's granulating. It's probably on its third quarter of life. Budget for a future roof in 5 years. Well, an experienced home inspector will notice another thing, that this whole line of shingles is slightly lifted, and it's 4 foot. And so experienced home inspectors say, wow, that's some sheeting. Why did the sheeting overlap? So right off the bat, the experienced home inspector is like, all right, we got a moisture problem in this house, and it's a moisture problem generally low. And this particular house had a crawl space. So now he's going to say, hey, the shingles, just like the good inspector, hey, the shingles are old. There's some uplifted shingles possibly caused by moisture. Need to control indoor humidity, run basement dehumidifier, whatever. We're still on the outside, okay? So they look at the roof, and then all of a sudden, the good home inspector is like, oh, look, they got ridge venting. That's good venting, And, of course, I don't have a picture, but they have soffit venting. And ridge venting and soffit venting work together. All right, so he'll say it's good venting. There's your ridge vent. But then he'll see this. It's out of focus. And even, when you're on a home inspection and there's a couple out of focus pictures, you're going to put those in your report. It don't matter, because even if it's out of focus, it doesn't matter. We know what that is. That's a Gable Vent. It's not rocket science, okay? So here's a Gable Vent out of focus. and then the good home inspector, he read a book, and they said, oh, you got to have ridge vents and soffit vents separate, and then you have Gable Vents separate, and then you have top hats separate. And if you mix them up, then what happens is you get this short circuiting. So he may be really book smart now and say, hey, you're going to have short circuiting. This isn't going to work. You know what? I hate to tell you, but the Gable vents are generally the best kind of vents to have. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, hey, you got a lot of venting, and, we'll check it out when we get up to the attic. All right? And so now you'll see this. And you'll say, the brick. I'm looking at the brick, and I'm saying, wow, the brick is in the dirt, okay, and it's touching the dirt. But what I'm looking for is I don't see any weep holes. Now, that doesn't mean it's a problem, okay? Most brick that we're going to run into, especially in our area during this vintage, didn't have weep holes, okay? Weep holes are generally put in the brick, so when the brick gets wet, it rains, and the brick absorbs moisture, and then it runs behind the brick, and then it needs a place to go. And if it doesn't go behind the brick and it has nowhere to go, then it usually goes down right into the block. A lot of times not a big deal, okay? But I'm going to say, hey, no weep holes, and then I'll just say something about the downspout because it looks kind of odd. I'll say, downspouts interfacing with the soil. Now, the good home inspector look at this and say, hey, you need to put a new cement top here. You need to fill this in. And I'm like, okay, of course you do. But he'll also say, hey, you got to get that out of there because if that breaks and falls in, you got a problem, right? So that's a good thing. What I'll say is I'll see this clay pipe, and I'll say, hey, the clay pipe, this is an experience, not just me, but, any experienced home inspectors, and there's probably hundreds and hundreds of them all over the country that have 10 to 20, 30 years, have done 10,000 to 20,000 home inspections. They pretty much seen everything, and everything, almost everything. And so they may say, hey, this is an old drain tile system. It's clay tile, and they can become slow and sluggish. Sometimes they, cause moisture. You might have to snake them. You might have to do some kind of water management in the future. Plus, of course, you got to cap that. So then in the backyard, the new home inspector sees this and says, oh, yeah, look, that's the drain. They disconnected it. Why do you think they disconnected it? He may say, hey, they disconnected it and rerouted it to the front. Now, real estate agents like to hear that because then it's a done deal. But, a good home inspector would say that. Now, a seasoned or an experienced home inspector would say, hey, wait a minute. They disconnected this. And then he'll stick his hand down in here, right in here. And he'll, he might, if he's got guts, he'll pull out the cap and look inside it, right? I don't, because there's like leaves and stuff going to fall down. But he's going to say, hey, they disconnected it. Then he'll look at the gutter and say, hey, I wonder if this basement was leaking and they disconnected it because it didn't work. Especially if there's a tree next door. So an experienced inspector is going to look at this and say, whoa, we got a story going on here. And he's going to make a comment and keep going. At the end of this, you're going to see how we put this all together. So here's another downspout, and this one here, okay, that looks good. Okay, they fixed it. The good inspector says, hey, that looks good to me. He may say something about this brick and the chip and paint and this tripping hazard here, but we're just gonna be talking about the moisture condition and efflorescence and things like that. So the good inspector is not gonna say a whole lot about this tree because it's out front. He may say, hey, you might have to level this. Now the experienced inspector is gonna say, wait a minute. This tree is 45 years old. It's lifting the concrete. They've already disconnected the downspout. You saw that. I wonder if there's an issue with tree roots. So an experienced inspector, which a realtor doesn't want to say this, but he's going to say, there's tree roots and tree roots grow. And tree roots grow, they get into storm lines, sanitary lines, and drain tile. So it's possible that you may need to snake this and inspect it with a camera. That's the last thing a realtor wants a home inspector to say. So a lot of times, the good inspector gets the job. I know in my market, the good inspector always gets the home inspections before the experienced home inspector because the realtors in my area here in Cleveland like good home inspectors. They don't want that whole story. You don't want that deal to go down the tubes. So, you're always looking for an inspector that's got, I want to say minimum 15 years to 30 years. Like me in Cleveland, I've done this for 33 years. There's a lot of guys like me around the country. I know a lot of people watching this video aren't from Cleveland. You guys are from all over the country. So just look up ASHE, and once you get to ASHE's, hit 20 miles or 50-mile radius, and then look at each one of those guys and pick the guy that's been doing it the longest, and chances are he's seen everything. Now, I'm going to inside the house, right? So the good home inspector says, oh, doors are tight. Adjust. Well, the experienced home inspector is like, why are the doors tight? They're tight because there might be a humidity problem. Maybe they're expanding. But let's not shim the doors and cut the doors and, plane the doors just yet. Let's figure out why the doors are tight. And so the experienced inspector's already seen a picture go by. And another door is tight. The good home inspector, hey, door needs adjustment. The experienced inspector, there's something going on in his house. It's two doors. Now, either it's going to be a problem with the joists underneath it. A lot of times you don't sister joist underneath it. You get deflection. Sometimes columns rust, in the basement. Sometimes you get differential, whatever, okay? But it could also be high humidity, So, and there's a third door and a fourth door. Now we look at this thing here. And so, the good home inspector goes, oh, yeah, look, the attic's accessible. That's good. You can get in the attic. Well, that's great. You can get in it, but the experienced home inspector is looking at this attic, and he already knows that most homes' HVAC systems are not balanced. So he already knows there's negative pressure and air leakage, duct leakage down in the lower level, which causes positive pressure in the upper floors. He knows that because most homes have this problem. Now, if you don't have this attic access weather strip, guess what? You got ice dams, and if you got moisture in the air, you got mold in the attic. And your gutters are going to fall down from the ice dams. You get water leaks, and you'll be calling your insurance company. So the experienced inspector is looking at this thing, and he knows it's a great, good. So what? You got a hole in your ceiling, but guess what? It's not sealed. This hole, this attic access needs weather stripping. So he's going to say weather stripping. Now he's kind of wondering. All right, we got uplifted shingles, right? We got some type of, changing around the drainage system, right? We got a weird pumping station up in the front yard. We don't know what that is, right? We've got bricks that don't have weep holes, right? And now we have an attic access that isn't weather stripped. So, and the roof shingles are uplifted. I guess there's going to be mold up there. I mean, you don't have to. I can find mold in an attic driving down the street. Okay, maybe the mold's been fixed, but I can see it. Okay, so here we go, up in the attic. Well, guess what? This is how, if you look here, the good home inspector was like, oh, look, you got a new roof. They put all new sheeting. You're so lucky. That's a good home inspector, right? And he's right. You got new sheeting. You got a new roof. You got new venting. Oh, they put more venting in. They must have known something. Because guess what? There's a disclosure. And guess what? On the disclosure, nothing on it. This particular disclosure, here's what it said. It said basement or crawl space had some moisture, and we fixed it. And there we tested for mold, and there was no mold. So now, why are they telling us now? This is the good home inspector. Oh yeah, they fixed everything, right? Me or an experienced inspector. By that note, we're going to say, why are they telling us that there was no mold in the crawl space? There was mold in his house. They're not telling us something. So we go to the attic. Now it's all coming together, man. It's coming together. The owners had to replace the whole roof because it was all full of mold. And where's the moisture coming from? We don't know yet because we haven't been down to the crawl space yet. But look at this. This wood is the original truss system, and you could tell this discolored, okay? And you got these new nails, right? And you're like, why did they replace the sheeting with the last roof? Well, they had to because it was probably deteriorated because of condensation. Then you look at the insulation. Now, the good home inspector is like, oh, I think attic is adequately insulated, but could improve it someday. That's what he's going to say. An experienced inspector is going to say, wait a minute. First of all, this insulation is not good. Okay, you need to improve it for sure. But that's not even the real problem. The real problem is these little spots. And these are caused by the nail heads. The nail heads in the wintertime were getting wet because there's a moisture problem going on in the house. So you got moisture in the house, high humidity, and then you got high vapor pressure going to the attic, right? You got a heating system that isn't balanced, and you got an access panel in the attic that isn't weather stripped. So now that moist air is hitting these nails and not rusting, but turning to ice, and then the ice drips down, and these are little drips, okay? And so we know the last roof had a problem, a moisture. So this house got a big moisture problem, but now it's got new sheeting. It looks great. Now, is it going to stay new? Maybe for a few years. We got to figure this out. So a good home inspector is going to say, hey, this is great. You got new sheeting. An experienced inspector is going to say, hey, this is great. You got new sheeting, but it was caused by a moisture event, and it's going to come back until we figure out what happened. So the sheeting looks good, and you could actually see that some of these new nails already got rust on. Look, rust. Guess what? There's rust. That means they're rusting up again. This is happening again. All right, and so let's keep going. All right. So there's our attic. Insulation could be improved. Now we go through the house, and the last thing a realtor wants anybody, especially an inspector, to say is, house has got lots of air fresheners. Did they have dogs here? Did they smoke? You're not supposed to say a word. Just don't even say it. Ignore it. Well, no, an experienced inspector is not going to ignore this. When you got 6 of these things, you're like, why are these things in here? There's no dog because you already looked at the ducks and there's no dog here, right? You already looked on the couch for no dog here, right? Now, you look for scratches on the windows. You didn't see scratches from the dog, right? And so you don't smell it, so you're like, there's something else going on here. Okay, this is for moisture, okay? Then you look at the dryer vent. Now, the dryer vent, first of all, this this had a crawl space. It was a split level, and the dryer vent actually went through the opening, and this dryer vent is way too long. And you could see the dryer lint here, and like, oh, that could be a moisture vent. It could be the dryer. If you got a hole in a dryer vent, you can ruin a house. You can ruin a great exterior paint job. You can paint your house with that $50 gallon Sherwin-Williams paint, and it starts to bubble, and then you want to blame Sherwin-Williams. Nah, man, it could be a hole the size of my pinky, okay, and that could cause it to fail. So here you got lint, and you got this really long dryer vent going through this crawl space. So a good home inspector is going to say, hey, make sure it doesn't leak. Okay, an experienced inspector say, wait a minute, this thing's way too long. Why are we doing all this? You need to shorten this length. It's, first of all, it's hampering the entrance into the crawl space. Number two, it's too long. Okay, 25 feet. This one is probably like close to 25 feet with all the bends. They say, hey, you're going to need to shorten this up. And you say, hey, we need to shorten this up. You're going to have to save money. You're going to have shorter dryer lengths or dryer times. The jeans are going to get drier quicker, Plus, you're not going to have this moisture event, okay? So now we're going into the crawl space, and look at this. They put down plastic. Well, the disclosure said we had moisture, and we fixed it. They put down a vapor barrier. So now we know this house never had a vapor barrier. That means that there was a moisture problem. I mean, a dirt crawl space underneath the house is a problem. Okay, you're going to get moisture rising into it. You're going to get odors. So this was their moisture problem. Did they fix it? We'll find out. First of all, this vapor barrier isn't even done right. Now, the good home inspector is going to say, oh, look, they put a vapor barrier down. That's good. But he doesn't know that the vapor barrier's got to be 100% sealed. I mean, all the way around. If it's not sealed, it ain't working. Okay? Oh, look at this. We got condensation and we got a little puddle already, and there's condensation underneath it. So now, and you got efflorescence on the walls and a little bit of moisture here. And look, there's some mold up over here. And so this basement or crawl space, and by the way, there's no insulation on the walls. And so this was at one time a vented crawl space. And, when they built this house back in the 50s, vented crawl spaces was the way to go. So a vented crawl space, it would vent, okay, and you would put your vapor barrier on the ceiling, okay. Well, you know what? That doesn't work anymore today. You got to have a conditioned crawl space. So what they did here is they made a conditioned crawl space, sealed up the holes, but they didn't do it all the way, okay. Now it's missing a bunch of stuff, okay. Number one, these walls are leaking for sure, okay? So, a good home inspector will say, hey, there's some moisture, it's a crawl space, you'll be fine, An experienced inspector is going to say, first you're going to inspect this whole crawl space, then come up with a conclusion. And you can see how the humidity is causing discoloration here and some mold. And you got this dust in here from the dryer vent. Then you go in and you crawl in here like, oh, look at this, it's all wet. And so the good home inspector is going to say, hey, the wall's got some moisture, but there's no puddles. Well, of course there's no puddles. It's not leaking because you got this big thing of dirt underneath here. That's a reservoir, and it just holds it temporarily and slowly evaporates, around the edges, and then that's your high humidity. This is your moisture generator, okay? This is your moisture generator. And here, look at this. You got moisture underneath the plastic. A good home inspector ain't going to say anything and say, oh, good, it's working. It's working great. An experienced inspector's like, wait a minute. It ain't working because, first of all, it's leaking out because it's not sealed. It's not 100% sealed vapor barrier. Number two, how the water getting down there anyways, and how's it getting down there? Okay, so you're going through, and there, you can see the vapor barrier. The guy ran short, never even finished it, and then he tried to tape it, and you do want to tape it, okay? But this guy's using duct tape. Well, nothing wrong with duct tape, but there's better tape and there's better vapor barriers, okay? Better millage. This is 6 mil, and it's on stone. What do you think is going to happen to a 6 mil on stone vapor barrier? The minute you crawl out, you're going to put a hole in it, right? So I'd recommend a better, thicker vapor barrier. And works great is radon blankets. They're pretty thick, okay, and you need to seal them. And you can see, so the vapor barrier is done wrong. The experienced inspector now knows he figured out the moisture event. Now the home inspector, the good home inspector is like, oh, there's some moisture stains, but they're dry. It's probably old stuff. Well, the good, experienced home inspector is going to say, wait a minute. This whole thing is moist, and the house, the brickwork doesn't have weep holes, right? Remember? It faces the south, right? And there's no trees south and west. and there's no trees there, so it just gets blasted with rain. So this is a chronic problem, not a chronic problem, but it happens when it rains for a while. Now, it's not rotting out the house, okay, but you could see that it's causing some deterioration. So on this note, normally I would say, hey, put insulation in here. I'm going to say no, just in case it gets wet again. You need it to dry. But I would say you need to insulate the outside walls, okay, because we're going to condition this crawl space. So we're looking here, and this is where the vapor barrier used to go because it was a vented crawl space. Now, the good home inspector may say something like, hey, need to repair the vapor barrier. It's ripped. The experienced home inspectors say, we don't need that vapor barrier. We need insulation on the perimeter, and we need to seal our vapor barrier. We need to seal the vapor barrier on the ground 100%. So basically, here's the big story, okay? So you got all these little things, except here's what happened in this particular house, okay? So every part of this house is talking to each other. So basically, the city had a problem, and they try to stop the basements for flooding, so they put these systems in, right? You want to find out about that. The house has some building design flaws, like no weep holes. Well, you know what? Maybe we're not going to do anything about that, but if we did, maybe we'll seal the brick. I'm not a big brick sealer guy, but that would be a solution, okay? The issue here was that the drain tile system is old and leaks, and they're not running a basement dehumidifier. And so the moisture is accumulating, and it's also getting underneath the vapor barrier. So it's a slow release. So the house has high indoor humidity. And then that indoor humidity basically travels up through the house because high humidity has high vapor pressure, and high vapor pressure goes to low vapor pressure. And plus, you've got an unbalanced heating system, which I didn't get into on this one. And that moisture ended up in the attic, and that caused the mold, and that caused the roof shingles to deteriorate, and not the roof sheeting to deteriorate. So the good inspector isn't going to say that. The experienced inspector say, listen, we got an issue here. It's great today, but and the real estate agent don't want to hear this stuff because right now everything's hunky-dory with the good inspector. No, it's not hunky-dory because these people are going to move in and they're going to have a big problem 5 to 10 years from now. So the experienced inspector is going to say, listen, you for sure you need to seal that vapor barrier. Number 2, maybe we put a sub pump in there, okay? Number 3, if you want to insulate, let's just insulate the crawl space walls and not the top because we don't have weep holes in our brick. Let's not mess with that. And number 4, we're going to put weather stripping on our attic access panel, okay? And number 5, we're going to do plan B. We're going to open a heat register underneath their crawl space and heat it and pretend it's like a living room, and we're going to put a dehumidifier down there, and we're going to run that dehumidifier continuous, as needed, okay? And that will keep everything dry. And in the future, you may consider some type of water management. And that's the difference between a good home inspector and an experienced home inspector. And this is just one story. And all these slides came from one inspection. So please rate and subscribe. We're going to try to do more videos on home inspection and just maintaining your home. So please rate, subscribe, and share. If you're in the Cleveland area, give me a call. Marko Vovk. I do home inspections. I do expert witness work. I've been doing this for 33 years. I've done 18,000 inspections. If you have house problems and moisture problems and you can't find anybody to answer or help you out with your house, we do have a service. You could Google, go to my website, www.houseinvestigations.com, or just Google Call Marko with a question, and Marko is a K. Call Marko with a question. And generally, within 15 minutes, we can try to solve your problem. We're like a 97 percentile, acceptable. But we'll figure it out. 97% of the time we figure out the problem. Usually takes 15 minutes, half an hour. There is a small fee. So, hey, please share, rate, and subscribe. Thanks for coming on.